May 13th, 2023. It's Mother's Day weekend in Detroit, Michigan, America's Motor City.
Detroit is a very unique town.
There's just a great energy that's going on in the city of Detroit. It's just a wonderful place to be.
And at 7:30 this Saturday morning, it's shift change at one of the city's largest hospitals, when nurse Colleen Michaels spots her coworker Patrice Wilson heading toward her car.
She left work at her normal time, the normal doors that she exit.
She was walking out after her shift, going to her car, and that's when things went horribly wrong.
As Patrice heads to her SUV, her coworker notices someone approaching.
It's pretty commonplace to see people hanging around out there. The hospital also has a mental crisis center, and people are released from those doors at all hours of the day.
Visitors are constantly coming and going, checking on their sick family and friends.
But as Patrice gets to her car, the person runs up to the driver's side door and forces Patrice inside.
What in the world?
It looks like they're struggling inside the vehicle.
It's very clear there was some type of physical altercation going on.
Then, as she looks on in horror, Patrice's coworker hears an unmistakable sound.
Oh my God!
The suspect at that point drove away in her vehicle.
And Patrice is still inside the car.
Security! We need some help over here!
Patrice Wilson's early life had been touched by tragedy more than once.
When Patrice was 9 years old, her older brother was hit by a car while riding his bicycle, and he ended up dying from his injuries.
She spent a lot of time with her brother. He took her everywhere he went. Those two right there were really close.
Not long after that, she also lost her father.
I asked her a lot of times, you want me to get you some counseling? She used to be like, oh, no, Ma, I'm okay.
Instead, Patrice chose to lose herself in her schoolwork.
I think that's how she dealt with her grief, from her dad and her brother diving into her books.
I never had to tell her to do her homework. She always took a nap when she came home first, and then she was like, I'm gonna get up and go do my homework.
She excelled all through high school.
No matter who she met, she always left a good impression. From middle school on, she was always such a good vibe and never had any issues with anybody.
Everyone just talked about how much of a loving, caring person she was.
And she decided to make caring a career.
After she graduated from high school, she went on to Oakland University College.
She excelled in science. And I'm like, you can do it. You have that in you.
She went on to work as hard as possible to be a nurse, because she said, if I can help anybody else, that's what I'm going to do.
In college, Patrice met the man who would be the father of her child.
Patrice got pregnant in her last year of college, and as a parent, I was kind of upset about it because I didn't want that life for her. I wanted her to experience life and then have children.
She wasn't looking to be a mother. However, once it happened, she said, I have to do what I have to do to be the best mother I can be.
Patrice was committed to raising her child, but she wasn't gonna let that keep her from becoming a nurse.
She kept studying, even in the hospital with the baby on the way.
I saw those books and I was thinking to myself, she was not playing, she was serious.
As soon as she pushed that baby out, the final was due.
She actually took her final exam from her hospital bed after she had gave birth.
Once she got her nursing degree, Patrice had everything she'd been wanting. Almost.
Patrice's relationship with her son's father, unfortunately, they didn't work out.
They decided to go their separate ways.
Patrice devoted herself to raising her son.
As a mother, she was the one to do it all. There wasn't anything that was out of her reach when it came to her son.
Her and her son had a bond that was unbreakable.
and her career as a nurse was taking off.
Patrice was a nurse on one of the busiest shifts, a night shift, where everything happens, and at a hospital that is arguably one of the busiest, if not the busiest, in our city.
Patrice did many different roles. She worked in the ICU, she did med-surg, she was a correctional nurse.
But there was still something lacking in her life.
Patrice had made a life for herself, but she really wanted someone to share that life with.
She was looking for love.
She needed to feel like love from a man wholeheartedly.
And she found it with 36-year-old Jameer Miller.
Patrice and him met through mutual friend. Patrice likes to dance. And her friend posted her on her Instagram. And he slid in the friend DM and said, "Hey, who is that?"
Then, tipped off by her friend, Jameer reached out to Patrice.
And it grew into a full-blown relationship.
They would just have a good time together.
I'll see you tomorrow.
But now, the day before Mother's Day, something has gone horribly wrong.
What in the world?
A coworker just witnessed a man force his way into Patrice's car and drive away.
That was just crazy, and it's unbelievable.
Worse, the coworker heard what she believed to be gunshots.
Colleen rushes to alert hospital security, but it's too late.
Patrice, her car, and the suspect have all vanished.
Detroit 911, what is your alert?
We have a possible kidnapping.
29-year-old single mother Patrice Wilson had turned her heartache into hope.
Patrice had lost her father and brother when she was a child. The double tragedy had inspired her to become a nurse.
She was a good nurse. She was compassionate. She loved what she did.
And she had recently found new love with 36-year-old Jameer Miller.
Everything was going right for her.
But now, after a brazen abduction outside the hospital where she works, Patrice's future hangs in the balance.
One of Patrice's coworkers had seen a strange person in the parking lot. They forced their way into the car and, after hearing gunshots, drove off with her.
Patrice's coworker alerted hospital security, who contacted the police.
We have a possible kidnapping.
Everyone was in shock. How did something like this happen outside a hospital?
When investigators arrive on the scene, they question the coworker who witnessed the abduction.
We were able to determine that the suspect was in a disguise.
He looked kind of strange, going around with a blonde wig on and an orange hat and sunglasses.
Did that seem unusual to you?
To be honest, not really.
You know, they were in a hospital setting.
You would think this person has some kind of mental crisis.
But according to the witness, he appeared to be waiting on Patrice.
As soon as Patrice left the hospital, that man in the blonde wig approached and pushed into the car.
Did she give you any indication that she knew the man?
No.
And they fought?
Yeah, until...
She said she heard gunshots.
But because of the disguise, she couldn't give detectives a good description of the assailant.
And there's little at the crime scene in the way of clues.
Patrice's vehicle was gone. There was no question about that. And there was a pink shoe that was left where her car was, also giving some belief that there was an abduction that happened.
The police figured the shoe came off after Patrice was pushed into her car.
However, they find no evidence of a shooting.
There were no shell casings found.
Although that could just mean that the casings remained in Patrice's SUV after the shots were fired.
Hoping for further confirmation of the eyewitness's story, the detectives ask hospital security for the surveillance camera footage from the parking garage.
We were able to pull video from the hospital in various areas, such as the parking garage and the area that overlooks where Patrice had parked her car.
Police figure, let's look at the footage to see if there's any way we can figure out what happened and get some type of leads.
When detectives scan through the footage, it matches what Patrice's coworker described.
The video surveillance that we watched showed what appeared to be a black male wearing a dark-colored tracksuit with a long blonde wig and a baseball cap. He also had a mask across his face, like a surgical mask.
He follows Patrice to her vehicle.
It's hard to see what happens inside the SUV, but once the man gets in, he never exits.
The car backed out and sped away, and that was the last time anyone seen her.
We didn't know initially what we had. We didn't know if this was a kidnapping and abduction or a kidnapping from a carjacking. So all of those things were in place.
In any case, the detective's first priority is finding Patrice.
The police issue a be on the lookout for Patrice and her vehicle.
Detectives were trying to find this SUV and trying to get any type of leads to where it could be going.
We wanted to do everything we could to find her, and I deployed a number of assets, our special response team, our commercial auto theft unit. We really deployed all of those assets to ensure we had the greatest likelihood of recovering her unharmed.
Then, while the call goes out to police across the city, Patrice's mother arrives on the scene.
Her mother works in food services at the hospital.
They just were screaming and hollering like somebody's just abducting her. So I ran out of the kitchen from the hospital up to the security.
They said Patrice has been kidnapped.
Look, that's what we think happened. We're not sure.
Oh, my God.
It's okay, it's okay.
At this point, she is totally terrified, and she just hopes that Patrice is okay.
Everybody was trying to figure it out, trying to find her car.
It's okay, it's okay. Do you know anyone who would want to harm your daughter?
No, everybody loves her.
Although she says there is one person who might be angry with Patrice.
She did just break up with her boyfriend.
She had just had enough.
Are those from Jameer?
He was abusive, he was possessive.
Detectives investigating the abduction of Patrice Wilson from the parking lot outside the hospital where she worked have learned that the 29-year-old nurse recently broke up with her boyfriend, Jameer Miller.
How long ago was that?
It was a couple weeks ago.
Do you know why?
No, not exactly, but
Patrice tried to hide from her family the situation she had with Jameer.
I only knew what she told me and what she put on social media. So outside looking in, they was good. I didn't see nothing, no red flags.
But as the relationship soured, the facade fell.
As much as she tried to hide it from her family, they figured something was going on between the two.
I thought the relationship was just toxic, honestly. I mean, everybody has a little toxic in them. But he was possessive.
The going back and forth and the fussing and the arguing, that's not healthy. It's not a healthy relationship at all.
Eventually, Patrice had had enough.
She got to a point where she was pulling away.
and she was ready to get out of it and move on.
But Jameer couldn't accept that.
She was having trouble breaking it off with Miller. He wouldn't let go.
While she was trying to leave him, that's when the persistence started.
He kept calling her, kept bringing her flowers, trying to cut her grass.
And when the gifts and flowers didn't work, Jameer tried a different approach.
He would do strange things. He would steal her license plate off her car.
He'd come over there, try to take the Ring camera off.
I didn't understand. I told her, what's the purpose behind this? What's the goal?
Patrice didn't understand either, but she wasn't worried.
She like, that don't mean nothing. Like, none of this scares me.
She wrote off Jameer's actions as essentially harmless.
But it didn't go much further than that, I didn't think.
Of course you're gonna send me flowers, because we're not talking. Of course you're gonna take my license plate off because you want me to contact you to get my license plate back. Of course you're gonna drive past my job because you wanna see if I'm at work, if I'm not out with somebody else. And she was very calm. She was just like, that don't faze me, really.
Only now that Patrice has apparently been abducted outside her workplace, the detectives suspect she may have been wrong.
The first person of interest is the ex.
But detectives' first priority is finding Patrice.
And her mother may have an idea.
She was able to give us some real-time information on where Patrice could possibly be located.
Apparently, Patrice and some of her friends had an app that shared the location of each other's phones.
Greg, can you access that?
I can't, but my niece can.
When I answered the phone, my aunt was like, look at Patrice's location. That crazy guy just kidnapped her from work.
What do you mean she's missing?
Patrice's cousin checks the app.
The last location that was pinged was a car wash in Garden City.
Detectives rush to the location shown on the app.
I went there myself with my partner, but there was nothing going on. Her car wasn't there.
But it's not entirely a dead end.
I went and talked to the car wash owner. I described the vehicle to him, and he says, yeah, there's a guy over there vacuuming out the SUV.
The detectives have just missed him.
We pulled video surveillance, and you could see him clear as day getting change for the vacuums. You can see him cleaning it out.
The detectives assume it's the kidnapper.
In the video, the person was not wearing the same thing as the person who abducted her. He had shorts on and a t-shirt.
He's no longer wearing the mask and wig either. But the video still doesn't give the police a clear view of the suspect's face.
But the fact that they can't identify the suspect isn't the most disappointing thing about the video.
Because detectives can only think of one reason for the suspect to be cleaning Patrice's car.
Something that happened other than just an abduction.
This was a homicide.
The search for Patrice Wilson has led detectives to a car wash in suburban Detroit.
She was abducted a few hours earlier from the parking lot of the hospital where she works.
There's no sign of Patrice, but the detectives do recover video of someone, presumably the assailant, cleaning out the interior of her stolen SUV.
At that point, the detectives determined that they are no longer investigating a kidnapping.
Until we saw the video from the car wash, we were hopeful in finding Patrice alive.
The detectives figured the suspect was trying to clean blood or other incriminating evidence out of the vehicle.
However, while hope of finding Patrice alive is fading, the detectives do have another lead on her whereabouts.
Her mom just sent us another text with location. Oh, great. Okay. Hey, can you email us this footage?
We found out that her phone was in Inkster, went out there to search for her.
Inkster is a Detroit suburb just about a mile or two from the car wash.
We went out there to search for her, knocked on the door.
Can I help you?
Ma'am, Detroit PD, do you know a Patrice Wilson?
Yeah, I know Patrice.
She indicates, hey, yeah, I know who Patrice is. She used to date my son.
It's Jameer's mom. Now we might have something here.
Is your son here?
No, he's not here.
We talked to her, try to feel her out to see how much she may or may not know, or if Jameer had even told her anything.
Have you heard anything about Patrice possibly being abducted?
Goodness, no.
She seemed genuinely surprised by the news.
But when detectives start asking questions about her son, her attitude changes.
Jameer Miller's mother was not cooperative.
When you're talking with the parent of a suspect, they are always going to be very guarded, and there's only so much you're going to get.
She would give some information, but not enough to actually help us.
When was the last time that your son saw Patrice?
Well, I have no way of knowing that.
There's a lot of emotional things going on in that conversation, and you can kind of read between the lines, so to speak. You could infer that she knew why we were at her home, but she wouldn't give any answers to what she knew about her son and his involvement.
But do you know where we can find Jameer?
No, I don't.
She doesn't want to be forthcoming with any information.
Like, she might even be covering up for her son.
Even when the detectives inform her that Patrice's phone had pinged at her house.
I don't see how that could be. I don't even remember the last time she was here.
However, She does admit that Jameer had been by the house earlier in the day.
She says he was here that morning, that he ultimately made a change of clothing from the clothes he had on into some shorts and a t-shirt.
Do you know what kind of car he's driving?
I don't know. I didn't look outside.
She seems like she's trying to hold back information.
But when the detectives ask to look around, she doesn't refuse. Inside, there's no sign of Patrice or her phone. But the detectives do find Jameer's phone.
His mother says that when Jameer came to the house that morning, he left his cell phone to charge.
The detectives take Jameer's phone and head back to the station.
Utilizing cell phone data in an investigation is very crucial because it helps you to pinpoint where you are at a particular point in time. And once we gather all of that information and we come back and sit down at the table, then we start putting the pieces together. It's like you just laid out the puzzle pieces and you start putting them together to see how everything fits.
Looking at the location data on Jameer's phone, it appears that it pinged off all the same cell towers as Patrice's phone had that morning.
Which is another indication that Jameer was most likely the man who kidnapped Patrice Wilson.
The detectives redouble their efforts to find Jameer Miller.
The police put his name out in the media and on the street, saying that they needed to talk to him.
But before they locate him, the detectives get a lead on Patrice's SUV.
Police in the Detroit suburb of Novi spot the SUV parked at an apartment complex.
When cops first saw the car there, they watched it for a few hours. They wanted to see if the suspect was going to come back to the car.
They stayed on it for a couple hours. There was no movement at all.
When no one showed up, they approached the car.
And as they get closer, they realize it isn't empty.
There was somebody in the back of the vehicle.
Patrice's remains had been located.
Investigating the attack on Patrice Wilson outside the Detroit hospital where she worked, had already suspected they were dealing with more than just a carjacking and abduction.
We knew going in that it could be a homicide. We knew that she was in great danger, and witnesses provided us information along the lines of hearing a gunshot. So when you put all those things together, unfortunately, you know that you are likely going to be dealing with an extraordinarily tragic event.
And now the police know for certain.
A patrol officer in the Detroit suburb of Novi has found a woman's body in the back of Patrice's SUV.
That's when the investigation transitioned into a homicide investigation.
The initial goal was to try to recover her unharmed, but unfortunately, that was not what occurred.
When homicide detectives arrive at the scene, they quickly determine how she died.
Patrice's body had suffered at least 3 or 4 gunshot wounds. They were all to the torso.
It looks like 2 additional shots grazed her right wrist and her thigh.
The witness at the hospital said she heard a couple of gunshots. That tells me that she was most likely killed instantly.
And despite the video of the killer attempting to clean out Patrice's SUV at the car wash, the passenger floorboards were soaked with blood.
Based on how the vehicle looked, where the blood pooled and where the blood was, he threw her over into the passenger side and drove away.
But who was the man who abducted and killed her?
After the body was turned over to the medical examiner, crime scene techs started processing the car for clues to identify the killer.
Police know that whoever did this is a danger to the community, and they have to be taken off the streets.
While CSI processes Patrice's car, the detectives contact the family with the news that she's dead.
They came to the house. They didn't give me a phone call. I was sitting at my house with my family, and the detectives came and told us that they found her.
He was like, she's dead. I never cried as many tears in my life.
I would really wish we could have brought her home alive, but we were not able to do that. But if there's any positive to take away from that is that we were able to recover her, to return her home to her loving family so that they could start the closure and the grieving process.
Then, after speaking to Patrice's family, the detectives dig deeper into her ex, Jameer Miller.
We executed a search warrant at Jameer Miller's mother's house, and we recovered some very crucial pieces of evidence.
One of my sergeants was in the backyard next to the garage, and he notices Patrice's bag. It's a bag that she carries her headphones and wallet and things like that.
But that isn't all that the detectives find.
There was some blood stains behind the house, like he had taken the body out, placed it on the ground.
Right then, I knew that what he did was, after the initial abduction and shooting, he threw her behind that garage to go to the car wash to clean it out. So her body sat there for several hours. And at some point, he came back and picked her up, and that's when he dumped the vehicle in Novi.
Inside the house, detectives find clothing that matches what the killer was wearing in the security video.
We ended up finding in the room that he occupied the track suit that had some blood on it.
And they find his sneakers, which has blood on them.
It's enough for the detectives.
So at the time, they really knew the main suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Jameer Miller.
Now all the detectives have to do is find him.
Hoping for a lead, the detectives dig into his police record.
Looking through Jameer's record, they noticed a lot of red flags.
He had some involvement with the federal government and with other agencies within the state of Michigan.
And his most recent brush with the law is only a few weeks old.
His house was raided for being involved in some type of drug trafficking.
He's facing charges on that for a sizable amount of narcotics.
He also had numerous domestic complaints against him.
He looks like he was someone who was a predator, who looked for opportunities to victimize women.
Years before, he had a relationship with someone else, and that person disappeared.
It was like 10 years ago, and she still hasn't been found.
Now they're wondering, did he have something to do with that as well?
The discovery only makes the detectives more determined to get him off the streets.
Our fugitive apprehension team and our special response team were executing a number of search warrants, knocking on doors. We were going to relentlessly pursue him until we got him into custody.
But it's as if they're pursuing a phantom.
No one heard from him, seen him, or talked to him after the abduction.
Until, after days of fruitless searching, he simply walks into the Detroit Police Department and asks to speak to the detectives.
He says, I heard y'all was looking for me.
To walk in is very odd and very strange. Normally, if someone had committed a crime, a murder particularly, they would flee, they would run.
As soon as they're notified that he's out front, Sergeant McIntyre escorts Jameer into an interview room.
This was the person I was responsible for Patrice's death. I was very confident we had the right person.
But Jameer says it's all a big misunderstanding.
My face is everywhere on the news. Why is your face on the news? Because they're trying to say allegedly I did some of my ex-girlfriends.
He knows what's going on. People are calling him, letting him know that the police are looking for him.
Which, according to Jameer, is why he came forward.
I ain't had nothing to run for, nothing to hide, none of that. None.
He basically was saying he had nothing to do with it. He had no involvement.
When was the last time you saw her? Patrice? Yeah. It had to be like April 30th. I dropped some flowers off at her house.
He was playing it cool.
We literally haven't been together, had sex or anything since the end of April. So did it end on a good note? Yeah.
But while Jameer claims that the split was amicable, the detective isn't buying it.
Y'all have any domestic issues?
Jameer admitted that he and Patrice had a very turbulent relationship, but he insisted he was never violent or abusive.
He would never want to hurt her.
However, Jameer doesn't say the same about Patrice.
She stabbed me before.
Jameer Miller has come in to talk with detectives about the abduction and murder of his ex-girlfriend, Patrice Wilson. But he denies having anything to do with her death.
Jameer claimed that the only violence in their relationship came from Patrice, not him.
He had made mention that Patrice had stabbed him.
Wait, she stabbed you?
The police are totally surprised.
Why'd she stab you? She's crazy too. She crazy.
But according to Jameer, he never retaliated when Patrice turned violent.
So you ain't never wanted to hurt her or nothing like that? Hurt her? Yeah. Hell no. What?
The detective isn't buying it, but still, he plays the game.
I mean, flat out, did you kill her? I mean, straight up, right? You gotta ask. No.
Sometimes when you're talking to a subject, it's like a chess match because they don't particularly know how much you know.
Until the detective decides it's time to tip his hand.
So the hospital video sees her being attacked, forced in her car, and the car drive off. Right? Then her car go by your mama's house. Her car went by my mama's house. Uh-huh.
The detectives actually say, hey, wait a minute, we have clothing from your mother's home. We have evidence that both of your phones were in the same locations at the same time.
The police are showing all the evidence to Jameer.
So how are we getting around that? Gotta ask my lawyer. I'm asking you. Gotta ask my lawyer.
He shuts down and he says, I don't want to give any more information.
When a person says, I want my lawyer, we just end it.
After the interview, Jameer is booked into the Wayne County Jail.
He was charged with murder, premeditated murder, kidnapping, and a slew of other charges.
While he's in jail, the detectives monitor his calls.
I'm listening to jail calls, the calls he's making to his mother and anybody else. In one call, he is mad with his mother because we found stuff at his house, found evidence at his house.
Jameer gets upset with her because she didn't dispose of certain items.
He expressed to her, I told you to get rid of that stuff. You had 5 hours and you couldn't do that.
The phone call with his mother becomes a critical piece of evidence at Jameer's preliminary hearing.
When that was played at the preliminary, he put his head in his hands like he knew it was done, that he was cooked.
The police lay out all this evidence, and as much as he tried to deny it, he realizes this is not looking good.
Soon after, his attorneys approach the prosecution and come to an agreement.
He accepts a plea deal for second-degree murder if they drop all the other charges.
The prosecutor did the deal because what it does is it spares the family of having to relive what happened to Patrice.
Me going through seeing my child in the trunk, pictures, the trial would have took me overboard.
I definitely supported her mom in the decision not to go through the trial because once you see something, you can't unsee it.
A trial also carries risks that the family isn't willing to take.
At the end of the day, nothing is certain. You have 12 people sitting in a jury box and it only takes one to say, you know what? I don't think you did it. And if the defendant wants to take the plea agreement and own up to what he did, and it's a decent amount of time for what they've done, I'm okay with that.
It's guaranteed time.
But as part of the deal, Jameer provides a statement explaining why he'd gone to the hospital that day.
Jameer is saying that he went to Patrice because she owed him money, and that was the only way he could get his money back by talking to her.
He says there was an argument and it turned into a struggle.
But according to Jameer, he never meant to kill Patrice.
He got startled and the gun went off.
Jameer even claims that he tried to save her.
Oh, God, Patrice, what do I do? What do I do? Put pressure right here.
Jameer said Patrice tried to help him stop the bleeding. Unfortunately, he couldn't.
And once he realized she was dead, he panicked.
Jameer said all he could think to do was to try to cover up what happened.
But police and prosecutors doubt his story.
You could tell in the text messages between the two of them, he was very abusive. He's always apologizing for something he did.
It was a very toxic relationship, and she decided she had had enough and she wanted to be done with him.
It like triggered him. It completely triggered him.
He's just the type to not let go. He didn't like the rejection.
And if he couldn't have Patrice, no one could.
According to the prosecutors, that's the real reason he'd gone to the hospital that morning.
He picked up a weapon, he went to a location, he grabbed a costume, he lied in wait.
What he did and how he went about doing it, he had every intentions on getting away with it.
Jameer, stop! Stop!
We believe that she was shot right away.
This was no accident. Jameer meant to kill her.
And because of that, he's going to prison for a long time.
Jameer Miller is sentenced to 35 to 60 years in prison.
He has to serve at least 35. So good behavior or not, he's in there that long.
He'll be eligible for parole when he's 70.
That's pretty much a life sentence.
By the time that he gets out of prison, there's not going to be anything left for him out there.
And that's enough for Patrice's family.
Justice for Patrice that day was served for me and her.
But justice can't restore what Jameer took from them and from the entire Detroit community.
Patrice represents all of our daughters, right? I have a 29-year-old daughter myself, and she's obviously made her family very proud. Going to work every day, serving as a nurse in a very busy hospital in Detroit, providing much-needed services to our community. Had her whole life ahead of her.
She lost her life because she was trying to do the right thing.
Patrice did the right thing by leaving her ex-boyfriend.
I told her, I said, you're loved. So there's no reason for you to even have to be in a situation like that. There's no reason at all. I think she wanted to be in a relationship and she struggled, but she was getting there towards the end. And I told her, I said, you gotta learn to be by yourself sometimes.
But just breaking up wasn't enough.
If your ex-boyfriend keeps harassing you or texting you or trying to come to your house, that's when it's time to call police.
If you got one person that you can really tell that will help you get out of it, you tell that person. Because I would have made sure she got out of that. She was an RN and she could go anywhere she wanted to go.
The heat in Houston, Texas, during the early 1970s was the kind that settled over the city like a heavy, suffocating blanket. It was a time and place characterized by a sense of neighborly trust, where communities like the Heights area operated on the quiet assumption of safety. In this working-class enclave, children and teenagers spent their long summer days riding bicycles, exploring the sprawling neighborhoods, and staying out until the streetlights hummed to life. Parents rarely worried about the monsters lurking in the shadows, believing that the greatest dangers to their sons and daughters existed far beyond the familiar, sun-baked pavements of their own streets. It was an era before the term serial killer had fully permeated the public consciousness, a time when a missing teenager was almost automatically dismissed by the authorities as a restless runaway. This naive trust, this systemic blind spot, would eventually provide the perfect hunting ground for one of the most prolific and sadistic predators in the history of the United States. The nightmare that unfolded in the Heights between November of 1970 and August of 1973 remains a profoundly dark chapter in American history. It is a story not just of unimaginable cruelty, but of the terrifying ease with which evil can disguise itself as kindness. At the center of this tragedy was a man who weaponized the very concept of childhood innocence. Dean Corll, born in 1939, presented a facade so meticulously crafted and so universally accepted that he operated with impunity for 3 agonizing years. To the residents of the Heights, Dean Corll was not a threat. He was an institution of goodwill. Following a stint serving in the military, Corll had returned to civilian life and embedded himself deeply within the fabric of his local community. He worked for his family-owned candy manufacturing business, a job that afforded him a unique and devastatingly effective proximity to the youth of Houston. Corll became a familiar, comforting presence. He was known affectionately throughout the neighborhood as the Candy Man. He earned this moniker through what appeared to be boundless generosity, frequently handing out free sweets, pralines, and peppermints to the children and teenagers who lived nearby. He cultivated the persona of a gentle, kind-hearted man who simply loved being around kids. He offered them a safe haven, a friendly smile, and the kind of undivided attention that many adolescents, particularly those from troubled or impoverished backgrounds, desperately craved. This carefully constructed image of the benevolent Candyman was, in reality, a grotesque camouflage. Behind the polite demeanor and the free treats lay a predatory mind capable of unspeakable atrocities. Corll understood that trust was the most effective weapon in his arsenal. By embedding himself in the community as a harmless, generous figure, he systematically dismantled the natural defenses of the young boys he targeted. He recognized that the most vulnerable population in the area consisted of adolescent males, specifically those between the ages of 13 and 20. These were boys navigating the awkward transition to manhood, often struggling with family issues, economic hardship, or the simple, rebellious desire for independence. When they vanished, the societal default was to assume they had chosen to leave. Law enforcement agencies at the time were ill-equipped and largely unwilling to investigate the disappearances of teenage boys, routinely writing them off as voluntary runaways. The police response was marked by a tragic apathy, leaving desperate families to search for their sons entirely on their own, unaware that they were looking for victims of a calculated massacre rather than rebellious youth seeking adventure. However, Dean Corll faced a logistical challenge. As a man in his early 30s, there was a limit to how many teenage boys he could naturally lure into his private residence without raising suspicion. The age gap alone could be a barrier to initiating contact with cautious, streetwise youths. To overcome this, Corll needed a bridge, a way to access his targets through the one channel they trusted unconditionally. He needed their peers. This sinister requirement led to the recruitment of 2 teenage accomplices, forming a deadly triad that would shatter the Houston community. David Brooks, an 18-year-old, and Elmer Wayne Henley, a 16-year-old, became the architects of their own peers' destruction. Both young men came from impoverished backgrounds, raised in environments where money was scarce and opportunities were limited. They were impulsive, impressionable, and easily manipulated by an older, seemingly affluent father figure like Corll. To Brooks and Henley, Corll was not just a friend. He was a benefactor who offered them a glimpse into a life of easy money and consequence-free indulgence. The arrangement between the adult predator and his teenage accomplices was as simple as it was horrifying. Corll effectively placed a bounty on the heads of the local youth. He promised to pay Brooks and Henley a sum ranging from $200 to $500 for every boy they could deliver to him. In the early 1970s, for impoverished teenagers, this was a staggering amount of money. It was a dark, transactional pact that reduced human lives to mere commodities. The promise of this financial reward, combined with the psychological hold Corll had established over them, stripped away whatever moral compass Brooks and Henley might have possessed. They transformed from ordinary neighborhood teenagers into active participants in a vast, organized serial murder operation. The betrayal inherent in this dynamic is perhaps the most chilling aspect of the entire case. Brooks and Henley did not stalk strangers in the dead of night. They hunted within their own social circles. The boys they targeted were not faceless victims. They were classmates, neighbors, childhood friends, and acquaintances. They were boys they played sports with, boys they had grown up alongside. Because Brooks and Henley were known and trusted by their targets, the victims never suspected they were walking into a trap. The accomplices weaponized their own youth and familiarity, acting as the friendly faces that guided unsuspecting boys straight into the hands of a monster. When a teenager feels lost, angry, or simply bored, an invitation from a friend is a welcome distraction. Brooks and Henley exploited this perfectly. They approached the runaways, the boys looking for a place to crash, and the kids just looking for a good time. The pitch was always casual and deeply appealing to the teenage mindset. They would offer an invitation to a small party at a friend's house. They promised free beer, an opportunity to smoke marijuana without parental supervision, or, for those needing cash, the promise of a lucrative, high-paying odd job. For a struggling adolescent, these offers were irresistible. They followed Brooks and Henley willingly, stepping through the front door of Dean Corll's home with smiles on their faces, completely unaware that they were crossing the threshold of an abattoir. The transition from the sweltering, ordinary streets of Houston into the horrific reality of Corll's private world was abrupt and absolute. The victims believed they were entering a safe space, a haven provided by the friendly Candy Man and their trusted peers. This illusion was maintained just long enough to ensure they were completely helpless. The methods of subduing the victims were calculated to avoid any struggle or noise that might alert the neighbors. Corll relied heavily on chemical submission. Upon arriving at the house, the boys were immediately offered drinks. The alcohol or water provided to them was secretly laced with potent sedatives and sleeping pills. The boys, expecting a party, drank willingly. Within moments, the drugs would take hold. Their limbs would grow heavy, their vision would blur, and the world would fade to black. The utter defenselessness of the victims highlights the extreme cowardice of their attackers. The boys were robbed of any chance to fight back, to scream, or to run. They were neutralized before they even understood they were in danger. As the sedatives pulled them under, the ordinary sounds of the Houston suburbs outside, the chirping of crickets, the distant hum of traffic, the laughter of other children playing faded away, replaced by a profound and deadly silence within the walls of Corll's home. This silent, unseen epidemic of disappearances slowly bled the Houston heights of its youth. Week after week, month after month, families would wake up to empty beds. Frantic phone calls would be made, missing person flyers would be stapled to wooden utility poles, and parents would beg the police for help. But the systemic failure of the authorities provided Corll, Brooks, and Henley with an impenetrable shield. The police reports all read the same, dismissing the missing boys as runaways who would eventually return when they got hungry or tired. The community was left to drown in its own grief and confusion, completely unaware that a coordinated, financially motivated slaughter was taking place right in their own backyards. The sheer scale of the operation, stretching over 3 years, speaks to the horrifying efficiency of the system Corll had established. The candy factory provided the perfect cover for a man who always seemed to be working hard and giving back. The wealth generated allowed him to pay his teenage accomplices handsomely, ensuring their continued loyalty and silence. And the accomplices, driven by greed and a twisted sense of allegiance, provided a steady, uninterrupted supply of trusting victims. It was a closed loop of manipulation, betrayal, and violence that operated flawlessly in the shadows. As the years dragged on from 1970 to 1973, the invisible graveyard surrounding Houston quietly expanded. The tragedy was compounded by the fact that many of the boys targeted were already marginalized. By focusing on runaways and youths from broken homes, Corll ensured that his victims were the ones society was already prone to ignoring. He preyed on the forgotten and the vulnerable, knowing that their absences would not trigger the massive manhunts that might expose his crimes. The Candy Man and his apprentices moved through the city like a slow-moving plague, erasing dozens of lives while the world around them carried on, oblivious to the staggering magnitude of the horror unfolding in the sweltering Texas heat. When the heavy veil of the sedatives finally began to lift, the victims did not wake to the sounds of a party, nor did they find themselves recovering from a night of innocent adolescent rebellion. Instead, they awoke to a reality so utterly devastating that it defied human comprehension. The transition from the warm, trusting environment of a friend's invitation to the cold, sterile horror of Dean Corll's inner sanctum was absolute. The boys, whose minds were still clouded by the potent mixture of alcohol and sleeping pills, would slowly open their eyes, only to find themselves stripped entirely of their clothing, their dignity, and their fundamental human freedom. They were no longer welcome guests in a typical suburban home. They were defenseless captives, entirely at the mercy of a man who viewed their profound suffering as a source of deep personal gratification. The realization of their predicament would hit them in sickening waves as they instinctively struggled against their restraints, only to discover that the intricate trap sprung around them was entirely inescapable. Corll had not merely bound them with random ropes. He had painstakingly engineered a specific mechanical apparatus designed for maximum physical control and psychological terror. At the center of this waking nightmare was a custom-built torture board. Corll had carefully constructed this large piece of thick plywood, heavily reinforcing it and equipping it with a terrifying array of restraints designed specifically to render a human being completely motionless. The wooden board was expertly fitted with heavy metal chains that clanked loudly against the wood, thick leather straps that dug painfully into the skin, and secure industrial locks, specifically placed to immobilize a human body completely from head to toe. When a boy woke up, he found his wrists and ankles shackled tightly to the wood, his bare body splayed out in a highly vulnerable, agonizing position. The meticulously designed nature of this board revealed the deep, premeditated sadism of Dean Corll. This was not a crime of sudden passion or a temporary, heat-of-the-moment loss of control. It was a calculated, industrialized process of human destruction, and the thick plywood board was its primary bloody workbench. The victims, completely immobilized and severely disoriented, were forced to confront the terrifying visage of the man they had always known as the kindly Candy Man, now transformed into an unrecognizable monster of profound cruelty, standing over them in a room that offered absolutely no route of escape or hope for rescue. The sheer psychological terror of this moment was inextricably linked to the continued presence of Corll's teenage accomplices in the room. As the victims struggled desperately against the heavy metal chains and unforgiving leather straps, their terrified eyes darted around the confined space, eventually falling upon the familiar faces of David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, the very peers who had lured them into this dark abyss. The betrayal was absolute, sudden, and entirely shattering to the fragile adolescent mind. The teenage boys who had promised them cold beer, high-paying jobs, and a safe place to hang out away from their strict parents were now standing by as active, willing participants in their impending doom. This unimaginable betrayal added a dense layer of profound psychological agony to the severe physical torment that was about to begin. The victims realized with crushing certainty that there would be no rescue from within, that the familiar faces in the room were not there to help them break free, but to ensure their ultimate destruction. Once the victims were fully secured and terribly aware of their helpless situation, Corll initiated a brutal cycle of abuse that defies the bounds of basic human empathy. The factual data indicates that the torture was not a brief, chaotic event. It was a prolonged, agonizing ordeal that could stretch for many consecutive hours, and in some horrific, documented instances, over several agonizing days. Corll, often aided or coldly observed by his teenage accomplices, subjected the bound boys to severe sexual abuse and brutal, relentless physical beatings. The violence was systemic, highly calculated, and constantly escalating in its severity. Corll utilized a terrifying arsenal of tools to inflict maximum physical pain, routinely employing self-made electrical shock devices designed specifically to torment his victims without immediately stopping their hearts. The deliberate presence of heavy pliers, sharp utility knives, and other barbaric instruments in Corll's toolkit speaks to a level of extreme sadism that sought to artificially prolong the immense suffering for as long as physically possible. He extracted a sick, twisted pleasure from the absolute power he held over the helpless teenagers, reveling in their pain, their tears, and their desperate, unanswered pleas for mercy and freedom. The catastrophic physical trauma inflicted upon these young, developing bodies was matched only by the total annihilation of their spirits as they endured endless hours of systematic, inescapable torture in a quiet residential neighborhood where oblivious families calmly went about their daily lives just yards away, completely unaware of the profound darkness hiding behind closed doors. When Coral had finally satiated his monstrous sexual and sadistic desires, the agonizing ordeal entered its final, deeply fatal phase. The teenage boys, severely battered, physically exhausted, and psychologically broken beyond repair, were granted absolutely no mercy. Coral would step forward to permanently silence the young witnesses to his unimaginable atrocities. The chosen method of execution was as cold, brutal, and mechanical as the relentless torture that preceded it. According to the firmly established facts of the police investigation, Coral either committed the final murders himself or, in a further act of ultimate moral corruption, forced David Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley to personally carry out the bloody executions. The primary methods of violently ending the victims' lives were chilling in their dark intimacy and their blunt brutality. Many of the teenage boys were slowly strangled to death, the remaining life forcefully choked out of them by thick nylon ropes pulled incredibly tight around their fragile necks. This specific method required the killer to be in very close physical proximity, directly feeling the desperate final struggles, the violent spasms, and the fading pulse of the victim as the vital oxygen was forcefully cut off from their brains. It was a highly personal, deeply violent way to extinguish a young human life. Alternatively, Coral and his youthful accomplices utilized a small .22 caliber pistol. They would stand directly over the bound, terrified, and helpless victims and shoot them at point-blank range directly in the head or the chest, ending their immense suffering with a sudden, deafening crack of gunfire that somehow never managed to alert the surrounding neighborhood to the bloody slaughter occurring inside the residence. The choice between the slow, agonizing death of the nylon rope and the sudden, violent impact of the gun seemed to be dictated solely by the chaotic whims of the killers in that precise, horrific moment. Regardless of the specific method chosen, the end result was always the tragic same. Another young life, full of potential, dreams, and unseen teenage struggles, was brutally snuffed out, leaving behind a devastated, grieving family that would spend years, and sometimes long decades, desperately searching for answers that were already buried deep beneath the unforgiving Texas soil. The constant, methodical transformation of living, breathing teenagers into disposable casualties of a madman's dark fantasy was a process that Coral, Brooks, and Henley repeated with terrifying, mechanical regularity. They effectively reduced complex human beings to mere physical objects to be used, broken, and ultimately discarded without a single second thought when they were no longer of any use to the cruel, insatiable desires of the Candyman. The sheer, unprecedented volume of brutal murders naturally necessitated a highly organized system for disposing of the rapidly accumulating bodies. Dean Coral was acutely aware that the continued success of his horrific, underground enterprise depended entirely on his absolute ability to make his victims vanish completely without a single trace. Over the course of 3 incredibly bloody years, he developed a macabre, incredibly efficient logistics network, dividing the immense, grim task of concealing the remains across 3 distinct, carefully chosen locations. The most heavily utilized burial site was a rented, unassuming boat shed situated right in the heart of the Houston Heights neighborhood, incredibly close to the very streets where many of the boys had initially been abducted. This proximity highlights Coral's supreme arrogance and his terrifying, delusional confidence in his own invisibility within the community. Inside the stifling, corrugated metal walls of the sweltering shed, Coral and his accomplices would use heavy shovels to dig deep, narrow graves into the hard, compacted dirt floor. After callously placing the broken bodies of the teenagers into the cold earth, they would cover the remains with thick, heavy layers of industrial powdered lime. This harsh chemical was specifically chosen for its dual ability to rapidly accelerate human decomposition and, more importantly, to aggressively mask the overwhelming, sickening stench of decaying flesh that would otherwise seep out from beneath the shed doors and into the surrounding neighborhood. The shed quickly became a subterranean tomb, silently holding the dark secrets of dozens of missing boys, while the bustling city above remained completely, tragically ignorant. When the urban boat shed inevitably began to reach its spatial capacity, Or perhaps when Coral felt the pressing need to diversify his disposal methods to actively evade potential law enforcement detection, he expanded his grim operations far beyond the city limits. He strategically selected the remote, desolate, and windswept stretches of High Island Beach situated in Galveston County. Here, under the protective cover of deep darkness and far away from any prying eyes, the killers would transport the bodies in their vehicles and bury them deep beneath the shifting, unstable sand dunes. The coastal environment offered a completely different kind of concealment. The relentless ocean winds and the remote, lonely location providing a vast, silent graveyard that stretched endlessly along the Texas coastline. The third location utilized by this deadly, highly coordinated trio was Lake Rayburn in East Texas. For this final aquatic disposal method, the victims' remains were tightly wrapped and securely bound in heavy plastic tarpaulins before being weighted down with heavy objects and cast without any ceremony into the dark, murky depths of the massive reservoir. By utilizing the rented urban shed, the remote coastal dunes, and the deep inland waters, Coral created a sprawling, virtually untraceable network of hidden graves. This geographic dispersal of the bodies was a highly calculated strategy designed to ensure that even if one single burial site were somehow discovered by pure chance, the sheer magnitude of the slaughter would remain largely concealed from local and federal authorities. It was a chilling, undeniable testament to the methodical, highly organized nature of a serial killing operation that functioned flawlessly, burying its bloody secrets so thoroughly that the horrific truth remained entirely hidden from the world until a fatal, violent conflict within the group finally tore the entire operation apart from the inside, abruptly exposing the nightmare to the glaring light of day. The oppressive heat of the Texas summer carried over into the night of August 8, 1973, a date that would permanently mark the violent conclusion of an unprecedented reign of terror that had quietly plagued the region. By this time, Dean Coral had relocated his operation to a quiet residence in Pasadena, Texas, a suburb that offered a new, undisturbed environment for his gruesome activities. The move had not interrupted the steady, fatal rhythm of his underground enterprise. Elmer Wayne Henley, the loyal apprentice who had spent years delivering unsuspecting youths to their doom, continued to fulfill his dark obligations to the older man. On this particular evening, Henley arrived at the Pasadena home with two new individuals, setting the stage for what was supposed to be another routine night of horrific violence. He brought with him a male friend named Timothy Curley, a typical teenage boy looking for an evening of escapism and free drinks. However, in a catastrophic deviation from the established protocol, Henley also brought along a young woman named Rhonda Williams. The inclusion of a female guest was a massive, unprecedented disruption to the meticulously controlled environment Coral had maintained for 3 long years. The teenage guests, Curley and Williams, stepped into the Pasadena house expecting nothing more than a casual suburban party. They anticipated music, alcohol, and the carefree atmosphere that Henley had promised them. They were entirely oblivious to the fact that they had just crossed the threshold into the final slaughterhouse of the Candyman. The atmosphere inside the home, however, was immediately saturated with a thick, unseen tension. Coral, a predator who had strictly and exclusively targeted adolescent males, was entirely unprepared and profoundly angered by the presence of a young woman in his inner sanctum. The presence of Rhonda Williams shattered the twisted equilibrium that Dean Coral required to carry out his sadistic fantasies. For years, his methodology had been flawlessly executed because it adhered to a very specific, rigid set of parameters. He desired complete control over vulnerable teenage boys, and the sudden introduction of a female victim did not align with his deeply ingrained psychological compulsions that governed his dark existence. Beneath his practiced facade of a welcoming host, a furious, unstable anger began to boil. He masked this dangerous rage behind the offering of drinks, maintaining the illusion of the generous party host while his mind raced to adjust to this unexpected complication. Coral proceeded with the initial phase of his trap, providing the teenagers and his own accomplice with alcohol that had been heavily laced with potent sedatives. Henley, perhaps lulled into a false sense of security by years of immunity, or simply displaying the reckless impulsivity of his youth, partook in the tainted drinks alongside Curley and Williams. As the evening progressed, the heavy chemical cocktails began to take effect. The lively conversation slowed, eyelids grew heavy, and the physical coordination of the guests rapidly deteriorated. One by one, they succumbed to the powerful drugs, slipping into a deep, artificially induced unconsciousness. The Pasadena house fell utterly silent, leaving the enraged serial killer alone with the three incapacitated teenagers. It was in this heavy, suffocated silence that Coral made a decision that would ultimately bring about his own destruction. He decided that the rules of his dark game had changed, and that the circle of his victims would now brutally expand to include the very person who had helped him build his mountain of corpses. When the heavy fog of the sedatives finally began to recede, the reality that greeted the waking teenagers was one of absolute, suffocating terror. The transition from a drug-induced slumber to a state of agonizing awareness was sharp and entirely disorienting. Elmer Wayne Henley, the architect of so much suffering for others, slowly opened his eyes to discover a nightmare that he had previously only watched unfold upon his peers. He found himself securely bound, his wrists and ankles restrained tightly against the unforgiving floor of the Pasadena house. The terrifying apparatus of control that he had helped facilitate dozens of times was now deployed against him. Beside him, equally immobilized and thoroughly terrified, lay Timothy Curley and Rhonda Williams. The shock of the situation crashed over Henley with devastating force. The clear, undeniable line that had always separated the predator from the prey had been instantly obliterated. Coral, towering over them, had completely stripped away the mentor-apprentice dynamic, revealing the core of his monstrous nature. There was no loyalty in the mind of the Candyman, only a bottomless, indiscriminate appetite for violence and absolute control. Henley realized with sickening clarity that Coral intended to subject all three of them to the same extended process of brutal torture, sexual violence, and ultimate execution that had claimed the lives of nearly 30 other youths. The betrayer had finally become the betrayed. The psychological weight of this realization was monumental. Henley, who knew exactly what horrors Coral was capable of inflicting, was forced to confront the imminent reality of his own excruciating demise. The tools of torture were prepared, the environment was secured, and Coral stood ready to unleash his fury upon the young woman whose unexpected presence had ruined his meticulous plans, the young man brought as collateral, and the accomplice who had dared to disrupt the fatal routine. Faced with the absolute certainty of a slow, agonizing death, Elmer Wayne Henley resorted to the only defense mechanism he had left, a desperate, rapid psychological manipulation of the man he had served for so long. Henley understood the dark architecture of Coral's mind better than anyone else alive. He knew that physical resistance was impossible against the tight restraints, and he knew that appeals to morality or compassion would be entirely useless against a man who possessed neither. Instead, Henley leaned into the shared depravity that had bound them together. As Coral prepared to initiate the violence, Henley began to plead, not for his own life to be spared out of basic mercy, but for the opportunity to actively participate in the impending atrocity. He desperately communicated his willingness to assist in the torture of his two friends. He promised to help Coral inflict maximum pain upon Timothy Curley and Rhonda Williams, arguing that his hands were needed to properly execute the elaborate abuses they had practiced so many times before. He weaponized his own horrific track record, using his history of complicity as proof of his ongoing loyalty. It was a staggering display of self-preservation through complete moral bankruptcy. The tension in the room was palpable as Coral weighed the offer. The older man, driven by his insatiable sadistic urges and perhaps momentarily blinded by the familiar, twisted dynamic he shared with his accomplice, hesitated. The prospect of having a willing participant to share in the degradation of the terrified male victim and the completely unwanted female guest appealed to his need for absolute dominance and shared corruption. In a fatal miscalculation born of pure arrogance, Coral accepted the dark bargain. He approached Henley and, slowly, began to undo the tight bindings that held the teenager to the floor. The heavy restraints fell away, restoring physical mobility to the very person Coral had just marked for death. The moment the final restraint was removed, the power dynamic within the Pasadena house shifted with violent, irreversible speed. Elmer Wayne Henley, freed from the bindings but acutely aware that his life still hung by a delicate thread, did not hesitate. The adrenaline of pure survival flooded his system, sharpening his focus and fueling a desperate, explosive reaction. He knew the layout of the room and, crucially, he knew exactly where the weapons were kept. As Coral turned his attention briefly away, perhaps preparing the instruments of torture for Curley and Williams, Henley scrambled to his feet. He lunged toward the specific location where Coral routinely stored his .22 caliber pistol, the very same weapon that had been used to extinguish the lives of so many boys in the past. His hands closed around the cold metal of the gun, and in that fractured second, the reign of the Candy Man effectively ended. Coral, realizing the catastrophic error he had just made, spun around to face his former protege. The sight of the armed teenager shattered his delusion of complete control. With a surge of desperate fury, the older man charged directly at Henley, attempting to physically overpower him and reclaim the weapon. But the distance was too short, and the instinct for survival was too strong. Henley raised the pistol and engaged the trigger. The deafening sound of gunfire erupted in the confined space of the suburban home, completely shattering the early morning silence of the otherwise peaceful neighborhood. He did not fire just a single time. He continuously pulled the trigger, discharging 6 consecutive rounds directly into the charging figure of Dean Coral. The bullets tore through the serial killer, halting his forward momentum instantly. Coral collapsed onto the floor, his reign of unimaginable cruelty brought to a sudden, violent end by the very hands he had trained to kill. The dense, suffocating terror that had gripped the house evaporated, replaced by the sharp smell of gunpowder and the shocking finality of death. Henley stood over the lifeless body of the man who had orchestrated the massacre of a generation of Houston youth, holding the smoking weapon, breathing heavily in the quiet aftermath. The architect of the horror was dead, but the monumental tragedy he had constructed was only just beginning to surface. The survivors, bound and deeply traumatized on the floor, had been spared, but the horrific legacy of the Houston mass murders was about to be unleashed upon an unsuspecting world.